You can always do a coin with anybody as well.
No, that is a terrible idea. Okay, good. You're on. Okay, we're going to talk today about the topic of a kippah. We're going to talk about the history of a kippah, and I would divide today's discussion into three parts. The first part is from the Gemara, looking at Talmudic examples of people who cover their hair. But there seems to be all of the stories that we're going to look at are non-halachic sources. So they are sources, but they're telling us about how somebody behaved, but it's not a halachic ruling. There's no Mishnah that tells us that we need to wear kippah. We're going to be looking at stories in the Gemara. From the stories in the Gemara, which will be part number 1, we're then going to go to Halakha, and we're going to look at references to the kippah in the Shulchan Aruch. That's part number 2. And then finally, in our final section, we're going to look at the kippah today. So we'll look at the sort of the background to the idea of a kippah from the Gemara, and then the halachic boundaries of the kippah in part number 2, and then in part number 3, how we view the kippah today. And I hope that at the end of our discussion, we will have an indication of how we may answer this head teacher who wonders whether all boys studying Tanakh should cover their heads when they study Tanakh. And I hope we will have an articulate answer to that question. Okay, so let's start with Gemara. We're going to look at 2 stories. One story from Masechet Kiddushin, and the second story from Masechet Shabbat. Okay. The Gemara tells us it's on Daf Lamed Aleph Masechet Kiddushin. Omer Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi said, Asur la'adam she'elech arba amot b'kuma zekufa. A person shouldn't walk 4 amot, like with your head in the air, like very sort of. It's not a healthy way to speak. You sort of like walk as. That's not the way I should walk. Now this is not a halachic ruling. I mean, it's guidelines. It's not like if it's like your head is at 180 degrees, then it's a problem. It's not something that is measured. It's guidelines. This is an appropriate way to behave. You shouldn't walk as if you were in the world. Shenemar, and indeed this idea of Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi is based on the verse in Yeshayahu, Melo kol haaretz kvodo. The world is full of God's glory. So God giving the impression that it's just not the appropriate way. It's an idea of modesty, of realizing that I'm not in control of everything. That's an appropriate way for us to walk. Then that's statement number 1. There's a couple of statements, but the next one is what's pertinent for us. Rav Huna bereded Rabbi Yoshua. Rav Huna said in the name of Rabbi Yoshua, Lo maske arba amot begilui harosh. You shouldn't walk around 4 amot begilui rosh with your head uncovered. Amar shchina lemala miroshi. Be aware that God's presence is above me. So the truth is, when you spoke earlier, Tivi, about the idea of Kedusha, there is something about raising God consciousness through wearing a kippah. Okay, so that's the first source from Kiddushin. But it doesn't look like a halachic ruling. It looks more like ethical guidelines. You follow? Everything clear? Now, the next little story is a crazy little story that you might have heard of, but we're going to read it. This is from Masechet Shabbat, Daf Kuf Nun Vav. So the Gemara is discussing the question of mazal. Mazal, how do you translate mazal into English? Luck. Like, are all the stars? Are we like, are we under the influence of celestial powers? Sort of. I'm not know very much about these things, but if a person is born at a particular time of day or a certain time, there's sort of they're star signs, right? And the time that you were born, according to them, has an impact on the person who you are. So I don't really know very much about these things. I just know every once in a while at work, somebody will, I know, some sort of outburst or say something outrageous, and then one of my colleagues will say, "Wait, when were you born?" Meaning, that behavior I attribute to a person who's from a particular star sign. So the question is, to what extent are we Jews bound by our celestial sort of group? Star signs. You're so much help. Yeah, you're very helpful. Yeah, to what extent are we bound by our star signs? Do you say that, oh, he's such a Taurus, that guy. Oh, he's a Gemini, if ever I met one. Like, to what extent am I bound? Can I break character, or am I bound to that character? As the Gemara discusses, that's a question and then really when he speaks about mazal, he's talking about star signs. To what extent am I bound by these forces? So the Gemara, according to the Gemara is discussing it, and one of the opinions is Rabbi Nachman bar Yitzchak, whose statement is Ein Mazal Yisrael. Ein Mazal Yisrael means that we Jews are not bound by the celestial signs. We're not celestial, is that right? The star signs. That's not what controls our behavior. We are independent. We can overcome it. And the Gemara now tells a crazy little story. This is the story. De'eme de Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak's mother, the guy is like a sorcerer, some person,
Astrologer.
Yeah, astrologer. Somebody who takes these things seriously, says to her, the mother, Barich, your son, Gan v'havei, your son is going to be a thief. That's quite a worrying thing to hear. Lo shavkita gilui reishe. So she, the mother, in order to overcome this inevitable, like a tendency of their son, she decided never to leave her son without a head covering. Amrele kasi roshech, and she said, make sure your head is always covered. Ki hechi titehavi alach e mata deshmaya, uvai rachamei. In order that you'll always have your head covered, and as a result of that, you'll always have fear of heaven, and you will ask for mercy. Velo have yada amai ka'amrele, and he didn't know why. Like, why is it so important that my head should always be covered? So she took this precaution in order to avert his star sign, meaning he was destined, her son, who was actually a very important person, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. So Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak was destined to become a Ganav. So to avert that, his mother took a precaution, made sure that he always wore a head covering. Now, Yom Achada, one day, Yatif, he was sitting down Kagoris. He was sitting to Kagoris to take Dikla. He was sitting and reading in like at the foot of a palm tree, date palm tree. Now I'm afraid to say, Nafal Gelima me alavai Reiche, his kippah, his head covering blew off. So now, for the first time, you have this holy person, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, who normally has his head covering to protect him from doing anything terrible, and he's sitting there under the date palm, and his kippah blows off. Dali einei chazer ledikla. He looks up, and he sees delicious dates. Now, this is not his tree. It's not his date tree. What does he do? Alme Yatzre Salik Paske Lekivra de Bashine. He climbed up. Now that's quite hard to do. He climbed up the palm tree with his teeth. Like he was desperate. He was uncontrollable in his desire to steal the dates at the top of the tree, from which we see how powerful the kippah must have been for him until then, in order to ensure that he behaved in an appropriate way. So those are two stories from the Talmud about different people who covered their heads. Now, what's interesting is, as a result of these two stories, we do not see any halachic ruling saying, and therefore you will need to cover your heads. These are just stories that tell us the value in, people who cover their heads. Is everything clear until now? Comments? Thoughts? Oh, Yosef, you are such a gift. Ma? Yes.
What about Rabbi Akiva?
What about Rabbi Akiva?
Rabbi Akiva is known as a bad person, and everybody knows that he's a bad person, but never mentioned that his head was covered.
You're right. Yeah, I don't know whether the Tanaim and Amoraim cover their heads. These are stories about particular people about whom we know they certainly cover their heads.
So it depends on the mitzvah that we're doing, whether the luck or the mazal is going to affect the Jewish people.
That's a different question. The question of mazal is really a secondary question in our discussion today. We will, another week, dedicate an entire class to the question of astrology and, mazal. To what extent are we bound by astrology? Are we not bound to astrology? How do we view astrology? Do we trust it? Do we not trust it? We don't trust it. That's a short answer. But we will discuss it certainly nowadays. What people have at the back of magazines is not something that we take seriously. But we'll dedicate a class to the topic of mazal. But what's pertinent for our discussion is that obviously his kippah was a very powerful protective force for Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak. But we don't see any halachic discussion. We don't know how big a kippah should be. We don't know what his covering looked like. We don't know when Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi and Rav Huna, Rabbi Yoshua, we don't know what they were wearing on their heads. We just see that there seems to be a certain value in wearing a covering. The modern Hebrew word, the word kippah. Kippah means dome, a dome. It's not a religious word, the word kippah. Kippat Barzel, exactly, right, exactly. Kippah is just and because the kippah tends to be in a dome shape. When we were kids, we used to call it a yarmulke. Have you ever heard of the yarmulke? Heard that word?
Yiddish, right?
Yeah, so I don't know the basis where the word yarmulke comes from. But anyway, okay, good. Everything clear until now?
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to go now in part number 2. I'd like to look at halakha, meaning how did the Shulchan Aruch take these stories and turn them into a halachic, halachic rulings. So if you look in source number 4. What's interesting is, I'm not sure where source number 1 is.
Maybe it's a typo.
Yeah, looks like that's a mistake. Oh, it could be the topic number 1. Okay, anyway, it doesn't matter. Source number 4 is from the Shulchan Aruch. Now, the Shulchan Aruch, you see this over here, is in the Orach Chaim Hilchot Tzitzit. So it's talking about how we put on our talit gadol in the morning. So he's saying, Seder atifato, the way that you put on your talit in the morning, kederech b'nei adam shemit kasim bekesutam v'oskim b'milachtam. You put on your talit gadol in the same way as people would put on a cloak. פעמים בכיסוי הראש ופעמים בגילוי הראש. Sometimes heads uncovered and sometimes with your head covered. ונכון שיכסה ראשו בטלית. But ideally, when I wear my talit should be over my head. That's from the Shulchan Aruch, indicating there seems to be a value in having my talit over my head. My head is covered for tefillah. So now look at the Mishnah Brura on that statement. Betalit shekisui zeh machnia lev ha'adam u'mevio liidei yirat shamayim. This seems to be quite close to what we saw in the second story, from the story of Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Covering your head, machnia lev ha'adam, it subdues your heart, u'mevi liidei yirat shamayim, it leads to fear of heaven. And then he quotes the Taz, Shadato, דנכון שלא יסיר הכובע הקטן מעל ראשו בעת התפילה אף שהוא מכסה ראשו בטלית גם כן. According to Taz, even I cover my head with my talit, even though I have a covering on my head already. Now, see, from what the Taz, we can almost like deduce from the fact that the Taz says that when I put my talit over my head, Taz, the commentary on the Shulchan Aruch says, when I put my talit over my head, I put my talit even though I already have kova katan, a small hat on my head, from which we can see that people were wearing a little hat on their heads. So it's not really a ruling. It's more like, it seems that people were wearing little hats on their head. As will become clear as we continue in our discussion, I think the value of the kippah is not, it doesn't have a great halachic pedigree. Does that make sense? You meaning it's not, let's say Hilchot Shabbat, or you tell somebody you're not allowed to have meat and milk together. So if I tell you you're not allowed to have meat and milk together, I can show you the source in the Torah. I can then show you the discussion of that source in the Talmud, and then I can go to the Rif and the Rambam, and then go through the halachic journey through to the Bet Yosef, Shulchan Aruch, until modern day poskim. I can track the halachic pedigree of that halakha with precision. It's a very clear halachic journey. But the halachic journey of the kippah is not quite as clear. It doesn't seem to have as clear halachic pedigree. I know that it is required today, but it doesn't have the same force. It doesn't come from the same there's no source in the Torah. It comes from some stories, but it doesn't have the same halachic pedigree. But I might just add now, I know really I should be saying this at the end, but just in case somebody stops listening now, it's very, very important to say that the kippah, we wear kippot today, not because it is a mitzvah d'oraita, a biblical requirement. It's not a biblical requirement. But there are certain items of clothing that I wear to tell the world that I identify within a particular community. And today, in our multicultural world, my decision to wear a kippah is a statement in which I say that I identify within the religious Jewish community. You follow? It is my way of saying that this is my people. These are the people with whom I feel comfortable. Does that make sense to everybody? So when somebody would counter that and say there's very little halachic basis for wearing kippah, it doesn't matter that there's little halachic basis, because it has become a symbol of identification within the religious Jewish community. I'll tell you a terrible, terrible story. I don't know if I can tell you. It's a story. I went to a lovely school in London, in which it was a Jewish school in which we were required to wear kippot. So it was a Jewish school, and just like you had a school shirt and a school blazer and a school tie, we also had a school kippah. We had a school kippah that you had to wear every day to school. And so it means, there were 90 boys in the class, And we all wore kippot every single day. But then when you get to the end of 12th grade, people go in different directions. But my decision to stop wearing a kippah is a statement about how I identify within the Jewish community. You follow? Removing my kippah is not a halachic statement, but it is a cultural statement saying I no longer identify within the religious Jewish community, which is a terrible shame. So they can say, well, it doesn't say anywhere, it's not like it's halakha, it's not a biblical requirement. It doesn't matter that it's not a biblical requirement because, there are lots of cultural norms, and the kippah is my way of telling the world the community within which I identify. Is that clear to everybody? So as we go through these halachic sources, it's important to put that as an important preface. Is that clear? I would say, and we will see this as we go in our journey, that it is a very recent cultural norm. Even 50, 60 years ago, I don't think the kippah had as much significance as it does today. And we'll get there as we continue in our little discussion. Okay, so we looked at the first source in the Shulchan Aruch, that is in the laws of putting on tzitzit. We're going to now go to the second. There are only two sources in the that talk about wearing kippah. We're going to go to source number tells us Yesh Omrim Shasur Lahasi Az Rosh Megula. You shouldn't say God's name when your head isn't covered. You shouldn't go into a synagogue without wearing a kippah. There's a certain respectful way that I should be walking. And he says, and I shouldn't look into it unless my head is covered. Those are from the laws of tefillah. We say with like having a bag. V'yesh osrim likanes bo b'sakin. A rosh should have a weaponry. Or b'rosh megula. You shouldn't walk into a synagogue without your head covered. So we see in the Shulchan Aruch the only context in which it is clear that I need to wear a kippah is either in davening, as I see when I'm wearing my talit, I put the talit, but I've also got this hat underneath, or when I'm walking into a shul, I need to have my head covered. So we have the stories about different people who were affected by having a covering on their heads. And then from those stories in the Gemara, we come to a halachic conclusion that I should wear a kippah in shul. Is that clear to everybody? And that little journey takes us till about 400 years ago, which is not that long ago in the Jewish historical journey. That it seems that people would be very particular to wear kippot in shul, and when they were davening, saying God's name, because you shouldn't say God's name without a kippah. It also means I will always have a kippah when I'm eating, because I will always make a bracha before I eat, and in order to say a bracha, I need to be wearing kippah. So people were wearing kippot either for prayer, or in shul, or when they're eating. Is that clear to everybody? And that seems to be how things were at the time of the Shulchan Aruch. Is that clear to everybody? Joy? Happiness? Any question? Oh, there has to be a question.
Just you've been watched by some friends of mine on YouTube right now. I shared the link. And one of my friends are saying like, "Oh, I remember there was a very interesting episode involving Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Pope coming to, and he was greeting him at Ben Gurion." While Bibi wasn't wearing kippah, but Pope was.
Oh, was that the wrong way round? Oh, that's a terribly sad thing. I know, yes. Interesting. Yeah, that's a very interesting point. A shame. Okay. Now, I'm going to read the Biur Halakha. The Biur Halakha that spoke about not walking into a shul without a hat on. Biur Halakha, this is now 100 years ago. אפילו במקום שנוהגים ללכת כן לפני השרים שזהו דרך קלות ראש בפני המקום כאילו אין עליו מורא שכינה ושיש לו כובע בראשו יש לו אימו וכובד ראש לפני השם יתברך. So he says somehow wearing this hat on your head indicates you have fear and respect in front of God. So the kippah is an indication of fear. It's interesting because Shmuel, I think you mentioned, so the people that wear kippot all the time don't realize they're wearing kippot. It's the wrong way around. It's all the people that wear kippot all the time. I almost become oblivious to the fact that I'm wearing a kippah, and those people that don't normally wear kippot are very much aware. So I understand that when I walk around sometimes with a kippah and sometimes without a kippah, so the moments that I am wearing a kippah, I can imagine those moments as moments of heightened awareness, which is what he's talking about over here. For those today where we wear the kippah all the time, it's harder to appreciate that. Although, I don't know, I'm just thinking to myself out loud, I think we are aware that we are wearing kippot all the time. Because if I were to take my kippah off, it feels odd. Yeah, it feels odd. Yeah, exactly. It feels odd. So my norm, I would say, it's not, sort of what the Biur Halakha is describing over here is that sometimes I wear the kippah, sometimes I don't wear the kippah. When I'm wearing the kippah, then I have a heightened sense of God consciousness. But you kippah wearing all the time, people, you don't have that heightened sense of God consciousness because you're always wearing it. To which I would counter, that's not true, because I am aware when I'm not wearing my kippah. So I would suggest that we are always on that level of heightened God consciousness. It's just that's my default position. So I don't move up to that position, but wearing kippah, I'm always there.
Especially when you're outside on a windy day.
Yes.
It either flies off, or with the clips on, you feel it pull on your hair.
Yeah. You need a cap sometimes. Yeah, I'm sure we all have terrible stories of where you're going for a walk and there's a gust of wind and then it like.
I went to the grottos in Rosh Hanikra.
Oh,
I
yeah?
did not have clips on. My kippah flew off down the rocks and into the water.
Oh no, so that was it.
But luckily for me, I had a cap.
Oh right.
So I was able to cover my head.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think that we're going to talk about the role that kippah has taken on. It's beyond halakha, as I've been trying to say. Okay. So now we have a question over here from the Maharshal. Maharshal is Rav Shlomo Luria. He lived at the same time as the Shulchan Aruch, and he was asked if somebody finds it uncomfortable to wear the kippah, does he need to wear it when he's eating? Would that be okay? Meaning I find it, it's a bit like weighs me down. Now listen what he says. Tshuva ein ani yodea isur levarech belo kisui rosh. So this is very interesting. There's nothing wrong, meaning it's very, very interesting. A kippah is like a badge. You understand? It's a badge of saying, I identify, these are my people. You follow? Lahavdil, this is a terrible, terrible example. Lahavdil, right? Imagine the World Cup. There's the World Cup, and it's England against Poland, right? So you have all the England players, and they're all coming wearing their England shirts, obviously, and all the Polish players are coming to the match with their Poland shirts. Now, if I haven't got an England shirt and I go to the match, I don't know, wearing a tuxedo, so there's nothing wrong with that, but I'm making a statement. You follow? That I don't identify fully as an England fan or a Poland because I'm not wearing my badge. I think the kippah is a statement. It's not a halachic requirement. I'm not, like we have mitzvot that you are, you're required to, to behave. You have different mitzvot at different times that we are required to do. The whole idea of a kippah is not to view kippah as a mitzvah, but to view kippah as a statement. I'm telling the world who I am.
When we say like it's more hue, it's
Um,
not even
More
hue
positive.
actually, isn't there?
yeah, I'm not.
It's like
Yeah.
nearby, but not
Oh, what a treat! Shalom Aleichem.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow! Now we can start. We've been waiting for 3 weeks, wondering what to do. How are you? Pleasure to see you. Shalom, shalom. We're talking about kippot today, and we're coming. There's a very interesting question asked to the Maharshal. The Maharshal's Rav Shlomo Luria, and he was asked if I find a kippah uncomfortable, can I eat without a kippah? Do I need to wear a kippah when I eat? And yes.
So, slightly off topic, but a stupid question. Is there any
stupid.
relation between the Marshal and the Arizal?
No, not that I'm aware of. I mean, there could well be.
They share the
Yeah,
same
Luria. It could be, I don't know.
ask.
Okay. So, Ein Ani Yodea Isur Levarech. This is really what we would say, Meir. I don't know if I can say that there is a prohibition. I don't think I could point and say, you weren't doing it, you transgressed Aveira X. If you look, the Rambam has a book called Sefer HaMitzvot. You won't see the kippah as one of the 600 mitzvot, 613 in the Rambam. Sefer Chinuch, also a list of 613 mitzvot. You will not see wearing kippah as one of them. So if you're asking me, did I commit an aveira if I didn't wear a kippah when I was eating? So I can't say that you did. However, Shamati Chacham Echad Kshaya Lomed Begilui Harosh. There was a wise man who had learned without a head covering. Va'amar Shekavet Alav Hamasa. It was heavy. Now, don't nobody leave now, because I don't want anybody to. It's fine now. Just hang on now. Mikol Makom. Nevertheless. נראה בעיניי, אף שאין איסור בדבר ואף לא מידות חסידות, כשאינו מזכיר השם מכל מקום לתלמיד חכם, יש לו להיזהר מאחר שהעם תופסים בה לקלות ופריצות, וכאילו עובר על דת יהודית, אפילו לומר בחדרו, אין לסמוך על זה שם עם הארץ יהיה ויקל בו, לא בחינם, ויאמרו כל שאסור מפני מראית העין, אפילו בחדרי חדרים אסור. He says something very, very, very important. There is a concept of dat yudit. Dat yudit is it's very hard to explain. It's not a halakha. It's dressing in a way through which I identify as part of the Jewish community. I want to give you an example from a different context, and then use that to explain what the Maharshal, with great wisdom and sensitivity, has written over here. I don't know if we ever discussed this, but there is a lot of halakhic discussion about piercings. Are men allowed to do piercings? What about nose ring, earrings? It's very hard, assuming that there are questions of like cosmetic surgery and drawing blood, but assuming that I've resolved that problem, is there any halakhic reason to rule I'm not allowed to do this, or I am allowed to? Am I allowed to do a piercing, or I'm not allowed to do piercings? And the wise ruling that I read in the name of Rav Lichtenstein, who was in Alon Shvut, was that the question concerning the piercings, and I think it's relevant here as well, is not so much about the particular action. It is very hard to find a halachic reason to forbid a piercing. Women, there's no difference between my ear and my wife's ear. And if it's not wounding my wife to put an earring in her ear, it shouldn't be wounding for me to put one in my ear. So it's very hard to give a halachic prohibition. But the question is, with whom do I identify by doing that?
And there's also the halakha of, it's halakha, but also in the same way, no. But we have the obligation to separate ourselves from the goyim, and of course, let's say goyim, get tattoos or they
Exactly. No, so tattoos are something else.
No, not tattoos. Yeah. Sorry, I meant piercings. But we have an obligation to distinguish ourselves from the other nations.
Oh, exactly. So within which community have I decided to identify myself by dressing in that particular way? You follow? And the prohibition is not on the action, but it's on the symbolism, which is much more subtle and it's much more difficult to define. It's something like, if you have a conscience, if it feels wrong, it's wrong. You follow? So I would apply the same principle over here, and I want to read his words because I think his words are very, very wise. He says over here, it appears to me, even though there's no prohibition in eating without a kippah, and it's not even it's not a halakhic requirement, nevertheless, if you're not mentioning God's name, we only saw the requirement if I'm praying, but I can make the blessing and then remove my kippah after the blessing before I munch my apple. Nevertheless, for a Talmid Chacham, you need to be very, very, very careful. Why? Because people will look at you and they will assume that this is an act of, choosing to not identify as part of the religious Jewish community. So my decision to remove a kippah is a problem, but it's not a halachic problem. It's still a problem, it's forbidden. I think I said that wrong. It is a halachic problem, but not the halachic problem that you think it is. It's not a halachic problem because the Shulchan Aruch says you have to wear a kippah, because it doesn't say you need to wear a kippah. But a bit about, like what you were saying before, lo telchu b'chukot hagoyim, that it's by taking it off, I am choosing to identify within a subculture that is not which is not my subculture. Same idea with doing a piercing. Even if it possibly, technically, might not be a problem, it is a decision on my part to identify within a non-Jewish subculture, and that's a problem. Is that clear to you? It's a halachic problem, but not the halakha that you think it is. The problem is the symbolism, not the action. Is that clear to everybody?
So what if you have a Magen David piercing?
Oh, that is such a good question. I think that's still a problem. I think it's the idea of a piercing. I mean, you walk here in Machon Meir, nobody. No, I mean.
There's one guy in the whole Machon Meir.
Oh, really? Okay, but. Okay, well, there's a story. I'm sure there's a story. Everyone's on a journey. But as part of my religious journey, I might come into the journey with piercings and then over time remove the piercings, but it wouldn't be part of my Avodat Hashem. You follow? I wouldn't do it as a person who currently identifies himself as part of the religious community would not choose to have a piercing. Likewise, somebody from within the religious Jewish community would not decide to remove their kippah, because the decision to remove my kippah, the decision to have a piercing, are actions for which the cultural symbolism of those actions is a decision to identify outside of the religious Jewish community. That is what we've read and then expounded upon are the words of the Marshal, Rav Shlomo Luria, who was quite honest in saying that I can't point to a particular Aveira that you transgress, because it's not the act that is problematic, it's the symbolism which is problematic.
I feel bad for Baalei Tshuva that are also Kohanim that do Tshuva and they used to have ear piercings, because obviously the holes will stay there. Because let's say if the Beit HaMikdash was built tomorrow, they wouldn't be able to.
Oh, yes. So I wonder what you're talking about, Cohen. I see what you mean. Yes.
How about the gender-specific items?
Huh?
The gender-specific.
Yeah. Okay.
So we learned about the is it the right and not to wear the clothes.
Ken lo tilbash gever simlat isha. Right.
Does it apply also to the other items like jewelry?
So that's a very good. The boundaries of lo tilbash gever simlat isha are fluid. They're cultural.
So would it be to women not to wear a kippah at the oraita?
Oh my gosh, that's so controversial.
I'll tell that to the women of the wall.
Or for men to wear the piercing?
Yeah, there are some.
No, so I think piercings are a problem. I think also women wearing kippot is also not something we do. I think the religious Jewish community do have men wear kippot, women do not wear kippot. Women pierce their ears, men don't pierce their ears.
There are some poskim that consider jewelry stam on men to be problematic, with the exception of a wristwatch. Like even Rabbi Vadia considers it a bit problematic because they look at jewelry as something that women do.
Right. Okay, I want to go to now the very, very interesting story. Marshal was written at the same time as Shulchan Aruch, but if we go now to the next source, this is Rav David Tzvi Hoffman, who wrote Tshuvot Melamed Laho'il. This is 19th century Germany. And then we'll go in source number 11 to 20th century America, and then we'll go in source number 12 to 21st century Israel. So Melamed Laho'il, he tells a very interesting story. He talks about wearing a kippah. This might shed some light on our earlier discussion about the Tanakh class. Okay, I'm going to go to the end of the first line. Kila Kedosha to Frankfurt on the Main, Bebeit HaChinuch, in the school that was set up by Rav Shimon Raphael Hirush. And indeed, Rav David Tzvi Hoffman says he was a teacher in that yeshiva. Yoshvim Talmidim b'shad limud shara medaim b'friat rosh. Students in Rav Shimon Raphael Hirush's school. This was like the turn of the 20th century, a little earlier. They would only wear kippot for Torah study, but they would not wear it outside of Torah study. And that was the decision of Rav Shimon Raphael Hirsch.
So this was in Germany, you said, right?
Huh? Yeah, in Germany. Now there's a story actually where Rav David Tzvi Hoffman went to visit Rav Shimon Raphael Hirsch, and when he went to visit him, one second, Parmishona שבאתי לביתו של הגאון רב שמשון רפאל הירש בכובע על ראשי, and I was wearing kippah. אמר לי שכאן הוא דרך ארץ להסיר הכובע מעל הראש כשבאים כל אדם חשוב. אל אדם חשוב. He said the respectful thing today is to take your hat off your head if important people come along. אולי יראה מורא אחר, because you don't want them to feel that it's disrespectful. I know this is certainly the truth. When I was a little boy in England, the respectful thing to do when they play the national anthem would be to remove your kippah and to put your kippah over here, to be bareheaded for the national anthem. We never did it in our school, but that was certainly, if you would look at like the last night of the proms in England when I was a kid, probably even now, at the end they played the national anthem. Nowadays, people don't do it so much. In the olden days, like say in the 1970s, everyone would wear hats. Just, if you went into the street, men would wear hats. Nowadays, they don't. So they were often in the concert hall and they may be wearing a hat or a cap. Not Jews, just because that's what people did. And then when they played the anthem, they would take their hats off and they would listen to that anthem bareheaded. And indeed, that's what Rav Shimon Raphael Hirsch guided his students to do in his school.
When I watch boxing matches that are involving British boxers, and when they play the national anthem, the thing I love about the Brits is that the British audience will always sing along with the singer of the national anthem.
Yeah, oh yes. I mean,
they're loud.
I'm Israeli, so I wouldn't know.
Especially if they're in Wembley.
That's very interesting. Now, what we see here from Rav Shimon Raphael Hirsch is that we have people, 19th century Germany, that it was a respectful thing to do to uncover your head in certain situations. That seems to be the practice, the norm. That was what people did. So if we went in the 17th century, when we're talking about eating without a kippah, and we spoke about the symbolism that could come with taking your kippah off, and that you should keep your kippah on, according to the Maharshal. The Maharshal had it on, and then Rav David Tzvi Hoffman has got it off. Taking it off, that's the 19th century Germany. Now, if we go to...
it was also straight at, a bit after the Haskalah.
Yeah, that is true, yep. Reform was very big in Germany at the time.
Maybe there was a bit of a slight influence in that.
Definitely. Now, the next, if we go to 20th century America, Rav Moshe Feinstein writes that really it's become very, very important nowadays. If you actually have a look, Igrot Moshe is Rav Moshe Feinstein. If you look, it's Orach Chaim Aleph Aleph, which means this is the very first responsum written by Rav Moshe Feinstein. Oh, maybe not the first one written, but the first one that he published in the first volume of his responsa was about wearing kippah. Nowadays, it appears to me, to walk 4 amot, even though technically it's only a pious thing to do. Aval kvar naugu kol Yisrael. This has become the widespread practice among all Jews. Lehit nahek b'midat chasidut zeh afilu anashim pshutim, aval midat chasidim layichidim menom b'chasidut v'chein lechol tamid chacham yesh lachmir shelo lelech b'kilui rosh afilu b'pachot midat ladamot. It's become the norm to wear a kippah at all times.
Even for regular Jews.
Yeah, for everybody. Jews, pious people, non-pious people. And that's really very much the situation that we have right now. The custom nowadays is to wear a kippah at all times. I will add, Rav Moshe Feinstein wrote this 1950s, 1960s. I grew up in England in the 1980s. And I remember actually that my wife and I, we got engaged quite a while ago, and we went to the Diamond District in London in order to buy an engagement ring. And that's a business that many Jews were involved in, and I could not believe what I saw there. I grew up in a very Jewish neighborhood in London. I saw a guy in the district there, selling or dealing with diamonds. He had peyot behind his ears, and he wasn't wearing a kippah. I could not believe that. They were people who were obviously very much identified as part of the religious Jewish community. Obviously, he was wearing tzitzit, because tzitzit is a mitzvah d'oraita, but he was not wearing kippah. That was 30 years ago. I think that his son, working now in the Diamond District, is certainly wearing a kippah. I think that the world, even in the last 20 or 30 years, has changed. I think that at that time, everybody, like English people, they're all with their bowler hats and their umbrellas and all looked exactly the same walking to work. We now live in a much more multicultural society than we did before, and I think the world's got smaller. You've got people, wearing all different types of head coverings. If you go on the tube in London, I wouldn't recommend it, but if you do chas v'sholom, find yourself in Chutz La'aretz, and you go on the tube, you'll see the diversity there today, so different to how it was 30 years ago. So if 30 years ago I would have, taken off my kippah in order to blend into the, like general society, nobody's blending. In fact, everybody is celebrating their identity. So if 30 years ago, this Jew felt, I better take off my kippah, even though he's got peyot behind his ears, he took off his kippah because this is a society in which everybody looks the same. We no longer live in societies like that, and I think that the cultural significance of the kippah has only become stronger in the last 30 years, and people that 30 years ago may have gone to work in there as a lawyer or an accountant or whatever it is, and when they get into the office they take off their kippah and then do their day's work and then put the kippah back on and drive back into the Jewish neighborhood, go home in the evenings, which was a very common practice when I was growing up. I think that doesn't happen anymore. I mean, it does happen to some extent, but it happens less. because it's a more multicultural society, and I think people are less phased. There's no need to blend in the same way as people may have felt previously, and therefore people wear their kippot all around the world with much more pride than I think they did previously.
It
Yes.
also goes back to also in this culture, it's both multiculturalism, but also a greater sense of individualism rather than a collective identity. Like I wouldn't say collectivism, but yeah, just a collective, cohesive unity. Um, so yeah, it's both multiculturalism, but also it's a lot of people are feeling this sense of an individualist identity, wanting to separate themselves.
Yes, very nice.
From everybody.
Yes, well, but the result is everyone's wearing kippot nowadays, which is interesting. Yes, excellent point. I want to add 2 points. I want to add one more observation, really, in the last year or two here in Israel, and then conclude with a very interesting theory from Rabbi Melamed. Okay, before Rav Melamed, I heard a very interesting story. I don't know if you've seen this phenomenon at all in Israel. We've been talking a lot about the cultural significance of wearing a kippah. That wearing a kippah is not a halachic, or sort of, how can I say it? The halachic requirement of wearing a kippah is not the same type of halachic requirement as other mitzvot. How do I know I need to wear tzitzit? Because the Torah tells us, "Va'ayulo totafot." You know that. I'm sorry that you need to al kanfot. You have to put them on the on the kanfot, the corners, the four corners. Sorry, the four corners of your garments. The Torah says it. We said it this evening in Shema. It's I can trace from the Torah to the strings over here that I'm wearing. The kippah doesn't have that same pedigree. The obligation to wear a kippah is not about this particular kippah or its size. It's about the symbolism of identifying as a Jew, or identifying as part of the religious community. Unfortunately, there's a flip side to that. There are Jews who, in Israel and probably around the world as well, their identity was shaken up a little bit after the terrible attack by Hamas, Yimach Shemam, here in Israel on Sukkot 2 years ago. And in that attack, people felt, like a necessity to strengthen their Jewish identity. I don't know if you know about this. There was a huge project of hundreds of thousands of pairs of tzitzit that people were making for the soldiers. And every once in a while, you walk down the street and you see people with like tzitzit flowing, but they're not wearing kippot. So interesting. Kippah is much easier thing to start wearing than wearing tzitzit. But what draws people is, it could be that the tzitzit, well, that's written in the Torah. Now, you don't want to take on something, but it's the flip side, unfortunately, of wearing a kippah. Just like I don't want to take my kippah off, because taking my kippah off would be a statement of identity, I no longer identify within the religious Jewish community. So unfortunately, there are also the flip side. There are people that they haven't got to Machon Meir yet, that they don't yet identify as part of the religious Jewish community. So therefore, they don't feel that the kippah accurately reflects who they are. So they wear tzitzit because it's a mitzvah, and I want to do something, in light of the terrible things that have happened to the Jewish people. I would like to do something in order to strengthen my relationship with God. But it's like a little irony. But on the other hand, I don't want to identify as part of the religious community, so I'm not going to wear a kippah. So the same thing that binds the religious community to put the kippah on, unfortunately, painfully, and hopefully it's changing, may also influence some people not to put the kippah on because they don't want to identify as part of the Jewish community. But we hope that Ezrat Hashem, they will join us. Soon they will sign up in this phenomenal palace of the king. Okay, so far on the kippah, on the symbolism. I want to conclude with a very interesting theory from Rav Melamed. Rav Melamed, I don't know where I came across it, but it appears in a newspaper that he wrote, the Besheva newspaper, 5 years ago. And what he says the Jewish people were commanded to wear something all day, every day, in order to increase their awareness, awareness that we are with God, and that is the tefillin. As you know, we're commanded, just like we wear tzitzit, we are also commanded to wear tefillin. Nowadays, we wear our tefillin for shacharit in the morning, but as soon as we finish davening in the morning, we take the tefillin off. Why do you take the tefillin off? Tefillin has got nothing to do with the shacharit prayer. I should be wearing my tefillin all day long. Of course, if you go to the bathroom, you have to remove the tefillin, which is a bit of a, which is tricky. Just have to be aware of it. But really, I should be wearing my tefillin all day long. Why do I not wear tefillin all day long?
Because of our thoughts.
Yeah, exactly. Because I haven't got the same level of control. Like it's a responsibility. To wear tefillin is a responsibility. I mustn't let my thoughts wander. It wouldn't be appropriate to hold certain conversations wearing tefillin. So I don't want to take that chance. So I wear my tefillin for a time that I know that I can be respectful for the tefillin, but I'm just not sure I'm able to keep that up for the whole day.
You
Yes.
and I were speaking about Rav David Bar Chaim earlier
Uh-huh.
today. Every time I see him in Neve Daniel, or when I visit his home, he's always wearing his talit, always wearing his tefillin. He
So the truth is, people are coming back.
Huh? Yeah, yeah. He was at my wedding and part of the Sheva Brachot.
wow.
He was part of the Sheva Brachot.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, there are people that wear tefillin all day, but the majority of the community do not.
The Vilna Gaon Ashkenazim in the
Right.
city.
Right, Nachon. However, Rav Melamed wonders whether the idea of having something on our heads all day long in order to raise our God consciousness. So for technical reasons, it should be the tefillin. For technical reasons, it's not the tefillin, because I'm not sure I can be dignified for enough time to deserve to wear tefillin. And perhaps the kippah that I wear today has taken the place of the tefillin. So there was a requirement, meaning ideally I should be wearing my tefillin all day long. But we're not up to that. I don't think we could rely on ourselves to be sufficiently respectful to wear tefillin all the time. And therefore, I've been downgraded. Instead of wearing my tefillin, but the idea of having this God consciousness all the time has been transferred from the tefillin to the kippah. And the kippah has become the symbol, as the tefillin should have been, has become the symbol of my constant God consciousness, but on a level, there's no words of Torah in it, on a level that I can go about my day-to-day life without showing disrespect to something on my head. Yes.
I have a curious question. I've seen one or two people throughout my time here in Israel. They don't wear tefillin in the morning because it's, let's say they're in a rush or something. But they always say the bracha of laniach tefillin during tefillat mincha. They'll wear it just during mincha. Is there any halachic issue with it, or is it completely?
So ideally, we like to wear tefillin for shacharit only because I mentioned the tefillin in the Shema. So I want to, meaning technically I could wear tefillin for shacharit and mincha, but if I'm going to wear it for one prayer service, let that prayer service be shacharit, because it would be a little bit of a hypocrisy to talk about the mitzvah of tefillin and not to be wearing them when I'm talking about them. So
at the same time, you can do it in the night because it's the oath. So basically, Ma'ariv is out of the table.
Yes, exactly. So it has to be shacharit or mincha. Exactly. So shacharit wins because shacharit has a shema, and that's why we wear tefillin in the mornings. Okay, sweet, wonderful people. I want to conclude. We've had a lively discussion that's taken us to places I didn't expect us to get. But it turns out that the kippah is a very important idea. Its halachic pedigree is something that we explored today. And then after your question, I'll come to talk about the Tanakh. Yes?
3 little questions. Maybe they were already covered. How about the different mincha? Like some Sephardim, they don't wear kippah.
Now you're thinking about the traditional, the misotim. They're they might keep keep Shabbat and Kashrut and such, but many times they're not really dati. They would call themselves misotim, like traditional. So like the basic Shabbat and Kashrut, but nothing more.
No. I think he's talking about something else.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about, but I mean, it's more of a, I think, part of the religious communities in Ashkenazi world that you wear a kippah, but not necessarily for Sephardim, even if they are Shomer Shabbat.
So the sources we have looked at primarily Ashkenazi sources. That is true.
Okay. The second one would be, how about wearing kippah for sports?
Oh, I think we do. That's a good question.
Was it covered? No.
No, we didn't discuss it now. But people should wear a kippah when they're doing sports. Oh, I think the kippah has become like a symbol of the community in which I identify myself. And if I were to see a religious Jew with a bare head, that's something I would. It might indicate that person doesn't identify as part of the religious community. People who want to do sports and their kippahs flying all over the place, they would wear a cap.
Yeah, but like judo, for example, you cannot wear a cap, and your kippah would be constantly.
Oh, that's a really good question. So I don't know what to say about that.
How do they do it in YU basketball? You'll see the boys playing with kippot.
Oh, do they wear kippot? Yep. Oh, that's amazing. So
basketball is very static.
Yeah, but they're always running and such. So.
But still, you're running.
Yeah, it's nobody just like flipping you upside down.
No, but they're also jumping.
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to judo. Good question.
How about the issue of people identifying more about by themselves as a Jewish, but not necessarily religious, and then they could eat in the Treife restaurant.
With a kippah on their head.
Stories about this.
That would be like I think some reform would do that, because initially the reform would be against the wearing kippah. But now it's like coming back as a part of their identity, and then they would eat in the Treife restaurant, so that would be Hilul Hashem, I guess.
Yeah, that would be. Yeah, I would. That's a very good point. Like wearing a kippah in a Treife restaurant. Rav Moshe Feinstein was asked about a religious person who wanted to go to the cinema and thought, the film he was watching wasn't really suitable for religious people. Should he take off his kippah to go to watch this film in the cinema? Because it might be a chilul Hashem to wear his kippah in the cinema. Rav Moshe Feinstein told him not to take his kippah off, because that's even worse. However bad it is to go to watch it, to go take off a kippah is even worse. At least wearing kippah, you'll hopefully find your way right back to Machon Meir soon. About your question about the treif restaurant is a really good question. Like a Reform Jew eating in a treif restaurant.
Then some religious Jews could see, there is a Jew with a kippah on his head.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, I mean, he wouldn't be asking me my advice, I don't think, about whether you should be wearing kippah or not. But it's important for us to know the fact that somebody with a kippah is doing something doesn't mean it's okay. Meaning, the assumption of your question is, if I see somebody with a kippah doing something, I can assume it's okay. That assumption is not correct. So, I know the guy going to the non-kosher restaurant would not consult me beforehand to ask if he should wear a kippah or not. But I, as a religious Jew, should be aware that beyond everything that we've been saying about the cultural significance of wearing a kippah, I think your point is a good point, and that is the fact that I see somebody wearing the kippah is not an indication that the activity that they are doing is okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, I want to conclude to tell you what happened in this Tanakh case. In the final minute, I didn't know what to do. I spoke to a cousin of mine who is a lecturer in Tanakh in Bar Ilan University. And I posed a question to him. He teaches a wide variety of different people. He felt it would be important to ask them to wear kippot when they were studying, even if they are non-religious. He's a professor of Tanakh. What's his name?
Yeah, because I studied at Bar Ilan. I did Jewish courses there.
So his name is Rabbi Cohn.
No, I didn't have him.
Okay, so he said that you should wear a kippah. You should ask the students to wear a kippah when they're studying Tanakh. It's an indication of showing respect for the text. It's not a halakhic requirement, but it's a sign of respect for the text, and we take the text of the Tanakh seriously. And therefore, he was in favor of the the teacher's request that the boys wear kippot during the Tanakh class, even though they're in a non-religious school. I don't know how the head teacher resolved the problem, but I suppose it re-emphasizes the significance of the kippah beyond its halachic power. Meaning it's taken on a halachic power, or maybe I could put it this way. The kippah, in conclusion, the kippah has taken on a great halachic power. It is a very important halachic idea beyond its halachic pedigree, and the result that could be because of the cultural significance of wearing the kippah. So I want to thank you all very much. It's been a joy to learn with you. We should all wear our kippot with great pride. Yishar Koach. Have a wonderful day.